The most dangerous evidence is the evidence created by the person who believes no one is watching. The steel door to the conference room clicked shut with a hollow echo that seemed louder than every voice inside the Grayford Police Department. Officer Daniel Mercer stood at the center of the room with the confidence of a man who had spent 2 decades believing his badge could answer every question before anyone else had the chance. On the polished table in front of him rested a sealed evidence bag, a stack of printed reports, and a black leather wallet bearing the gold letters FBI. Around the room, officers watched in uneasy silence while Captain Harold Vance folded his arms, waiting for the explanation Mercer clearly could not wait to deliver. Across from them stood Maya Brooks, 27 years old, dressed in a navy blazer that had collected faint traces of dust from the parking lot where she had been stopped only minutes earlier. Her hands rested calmly in front of her, secured with department-issued restraints, yet there was nothing defeated about the way she carried herself. She neither protested nor pleaded. She simply watched. Mercer lifted the evidence bag with a satisfied smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "our FBI trainee has been hiding more than her resume." Several officers exchanged uncertain glances while another quietly looked toward the floor, unwilling to meet Maya's eyes. Mercer placed the bag back onto the table as though presenting the final piece of an open-and-shut case. "Illegal narcotics recovered from her vehicle during a lawful search," he continued. "Chain of custody documented. Witnesses present. This investigation is over." Imagine standing in that room, surrounded by people already deciding who you are before you have spoken a single word. Imagine realizing that the louder one person sounds, the less anyone bothers to ask whether the story is actually true. Maya remained silent. Her breathing stayed even. Her expression never changed. Mercer mistook that silence for surrender. He stepped closer, holding out his hand. "Your FBI credentials," he said. "Now." For the first time since entering the room, Maya looked directly into his eyes. There was no anger there, no panic, only a strange kind of patience that made even Captain Vance shift slightly where he stood. "Before I hand you my credentials," she said quietly, "you may want to find out who's listening." The room froze. Mercer frowned, confused more than concerned. Then a sharp vibration broke the silence. His department-issued phone lit up against the table. Every pair of eyes drifted toward the glowing screen. A single notification appeared across the display in bold letters. "Federal evidence, upload complete." Mercer stared at the message, the confidence on his face interrupted for the first time that morning. Maya said nothing more. She didn't have to. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with raised voices or dramatic entrances. Sometimes it appears as a single sentence on a screen, quietly reminding everyone that the story they believed they controlled had already been written somewhere else. 72 hours earlier, none of them realized that the newest FBI trainee walking through the front doors of Grayford Police Department had arrived with far more than a notebook, a temporary badge, and a willingness to learn. 72 hours earlier, the Grayford Police Department looked exactly like the kind of place people trusted without asking questions. Morning sunlight spilled across the brick building, reflecting off neatly polished patrol cars lined in perfect rows outside. Inside, the steady rhythm of ringing phones, humming printers, and conversations drifting through narrow hallways created the comforting illusion that everything operated exactly as it should. Maya Brooks paused for only a second before stepping through the front entrance, carrying a simple messenger bag over one shoulder and a notebook tucked beneath her arm. Her temporary identification identified her as an FBI trainee assigned to observe local procedures as part of a field development program. She smiled politely at the front desk clerk, signed the visitor log, and quietly thanked the dispatcher who pointed her toward the briefing room. Nothing about her arrival suggested she would become the center of attention before the week was over. Daniel Mercer noticed her almost immediately. He leaned casually against the coffee station, watching as she introduced herself to Captain Harold Vance with calm professionalism. There was something about the newcomer's quiet confidence that irritated him before she had spoken more than a handful of words. In his experience, people who arrived with federal credentials usually wanted to impress someone. Maya did not. She simply listened, wrote careful notes, and observed everything around her without interrupting anyone. Mercer interpreted that silence as uncertainty. "Looks like they are sending trainees younger every year." he remarked loud enough for nearby officers to hear. A few chuckled politely before returning to their paperwork. Maya acknowledged the comment with a courteous smile, but never responded. That small reaction unsettled Mercer more than any argument could have. Throughout the morning, he assigned her routine tasks that had little to do with investigative work. He asked her to organize outdated files, inventory storage shelves, and sit through administrative meetings that produced almost no useful information. Whenever another officer offered to include her in an active discussion, Mercer found another reason to send her somewhere else. Observation comes before participation, he repeated with an easy grin that sounded reasonable to everyone except the person hearing it for the fourth time that day. Imagine entering a room where every decision about your ability has already been made before you even introduce yourself. Some people speak loudly to establish authority. Others simply decide who belongs and who does not. Maya accepted every assignment without complaint. She thanked officers for directions, remembered every name she heard, and filled page after page inside her notebook with careful handwriting. By late afternoon, she knew which deputies avoided eye contact whenever Mercer entered the room, which supervisors stopped conversations as he approached, and which evidence lockers required 2 signatures but often received only 1. None of those details seemed important alone. Together, they formed a pattern too precise to ignore. Before leaving for the evening, Maya paused outside the evidence room just long enough to notice Mercer unlocking the door after regular access hours. He glanced over his shoulder, smiled as though nothing unusual had happened, and pulled the heavy door closed behind him. Maya looked down at her notebook and calmly wrote the exact time before continuing toward the parking lot. She never looked back, but she remembered every second. The following morning arrived with a steady rain that coated the streets of Grayford in a thin layer of silver, turning every reflection into something slightly distorted. Maya Brooks parked across from the police department just before 7:30 and sat inside her car for a moment, watching officers filter through the entrance with coffee cups in one hand and folders in the other. Every workplace had its routines, and routines often revealed more than interviews ever could. As she walked inside, she greeted everyone by name, earning surprised smiles from employees who did not expect a newcomer to remember such small details after only one day. Daniel Mercer noticed that too. He believed familiarity was something people earned over years, not overnight. During the morning briefing, he barely acknowledged Maya except to remind everyone that she was there to observe rather than participate. His words sounded professional, but his tone carried the unmistakable message that she did not belong beside experienced officers. Maya simply nodded and continued taking notes. A few hours later, Captain Harold Vance asked Maya to help organize archived evidence logs that had not been reviewed in years. The assignment appeared ordinary, almost boring, yet it placed her inside the records room where decades of paperwork quietly documented the department's history. Dust floated through narrow beams of light, while old filing cabinets stretched along the walls like silent witnesses. Maya compared inventory sheets with digital records, moving patiently from one binder to the next. Most entries matched exactly. Then one line caught her attention. A package logged into evidence carried a seal identification number that differed by a single digit from the number entered into the electronic database. At first glance, it looked like a simple typing mistake, but another file revealed the same pattern. Then another. Small inconsistencies repeated often enough to become impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Imagine finding one missing puzzle piece. You might assume it was misplaced. But when you discover the same missing piece in several different boxes, you begin asking who removed them and why. Maya carefully copied each reference into her notebook without removing a single document from its place. She knew that changing even one folder could alert someone who was paying attention. Later that afternoon, she accompanied another officer to the temporary holding area to deliver routine paperwork. There she met Marcus Reed, a quiet man waiting for his hearing. He looked exhausted more than angry. When Maya introduced herself, Marcus hesitated before speaking. "They said they found something in my trunk," he explained softly. "I kept asking to see the camera recording, but they told me it was unavailable." Maya listened without interrupting. She did not promise to solve anything. She simply asked careful questions, allowing Marcus to describe every detail he could remember. When she returned upstairs, she requested access to the corresponding vehicle camera file through normal procedures. The system responded that the recording no longer existed, but an audit screen revealed something far more interesting. The file had not disappeared on its own. It had been accessed after the arrest and manually removed under an authorized department account. Beside the transaction appeared one familiar name, Daniel Mercer. Maya closed the window without changing her expression. Across the hallway, Mercer laughed with several officers, completely unaware that one overlooked digital record had quietly become the first thread capable of unraveling everything he believed would remain hidden. By the beginning of the third day, Grayford Police Department no longer felt like an unfamiliar building to Maya Brooks. She knew which hallway echoed before the morning briefing, which patrol officers greeted the dispatcher before collecting their keys, and which office doors quietly closed whenever Daniel Mercer walked past. The routine had become predictable, but Mercer himself had become noticeably different. He no longer viewed Maya as an inexperienced trainee completing paperwork. He had begun watching her. Every time she entered a room, his eyes followed. Every question she asked seemed to arrive back at him through someone else before the afternoon was over. He smiled as often as before, but the smile no longer reached his eyes. Imagine realizing that the person you underestimated has stopped making mistakes. Eventually, suspicion replaces confidence. Mercer decided it was time to learn more about the quiet woman who never seemed surprised by anything. He casually asked another officer where Maya was staying. He glanced through the visitor log at the front desk. He even volunteered to walk her through storage procedures, paying less attention to the evidence shelves than to the notebook she carried everywhere. Maya noticed every attempt without acknowledging a single one. She understood that people searching for answers often revealed more about themselves than the person they were investigating. That afternoon, she deliberately left her notebook on an empty conference table while stepping out to answer what appeared to be a routine telephone call. The notebook contained neat pages of observations about coffee schedules, maintenance requests, parking assignments, and equipment inventories. Nothing inside pointed toward misconduct. Nothing connected to Mercer. Nothing looked remotely important. When Maya returned several minutes later, the notebook remained exactly where she had left it. Mercer was standing across the room speaking with another officer, carrying on an ordinary conversation that sounded almost rehearsed. Maya picked up the notebook, thanked everyone for allowing her to use the room, and quietly walked away. She never looked back, but she already knew someone had opened it. A tiny strip of transparent tape she had placed along the edge of one page had shifted less than a quarter of an inch. Barely visible. Impossible to notice unless you were the one who placed it there. Mercer believed he had just confirmed that Maya was wasting her time with harmless observations. He never imagined the notebook itself had been the observation. Later that evening, Maya visited a small neighborhood diner a few blocks from the courthouse, a place where local officers often stopped after their shifts. She chose a booth near the window and ordered nothing more than coffee. A few minutes later, Officer Ethan Cole quietly entered, carrying the uneasy expression of someone who had spent too long deciding whether to show up. He sat across from her only after looking over his shoulder twice. His voice remained low. "You should stop asking questions about old evidence," he said. Maya stirred her coffee without interrupting him. Ethan looked toward the rain sliding down the glass before continuing. "People think Mercer built his reputation by solving difficult cases. That is not the whole story." He paused, choosing every word carefully. "Some officers tried raising concerns years ago. None of them stayed here very long afterward." Maya listened without reacting. Fear often spoke more honestly than confidence ever could. Ethan stood to leave, but hesitated one last time. "If Mercer starts paying attention to you," he said quietly, "do not assume he is guessing. Assume he believes he already knows what you are doing." Maya watched him disappear into the evening before opening her notebook once again. On the next blank page, she wrote only one sentence. "The trap works best when both sides believe they are setting it." The next morning began with an unusual calm that felt almost rehearsed. Grayford Police Department moved through its familiar routines, yet Maya Brooks sensed that something beneath the surface had shifted overnight. Daniel Mercer greeted everyone with the same easy confidence he always displayed, laughing in the hallway, exchanging friendly conversations with supervisors, and offering helpful advice to younger officers. To anyone passing through the building, he looked like the model veteran every department hoped to have. That was exactly what made him difficult to question. Reputation often became the strongest shield long before facts ever entered the room. Maya continued her assignments as though nothing had changed. She organized reports, reviewed inventory records, and accepted every routine task Mercer placed in front of her. She never challenged his authority in public. She never corrected him. She never hinted that she had already noticed the inconsistencies surrounding several evidence files. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle while pretending you have not even noticed the missing pieces. Sometimes the safest way to move forward is to let the other person believe they are several steps ahead. Shortly after lunch, Maya received permission to visit several residents connected to older case files as part of her training assignment. The request appeared completely ordinary, and Mercer approved it without hesitation. He believed she was simply practicing interview techniques. Instead, Maya quietly met people whose names had almost disappeared inside forgotten folders. Marcus Reed described the day his arrest changed everything, repeating details that matched the missing vehicle recording she had already discovered. An elderly woman named Lorraine Watkins spoke about her son, who lost his job after an arrest that was eventually dismissed even though the damage to his reputation never disappeared. Neither person asked Maya for promises. They only wanted someone willing to listen without rushing to judgment. By late afternoon, Maya met Officer Ethan Cole once again, this time inside a small public library where neither of them attracted attention. Ethan carried a worn envelope that looked as though it had remained hidden for years. Inside were handwritten notes, copies of shift schedules, and several incident numbers connected to cases involving Mercer. None of the papers proved misconduct by themselves, but together they revealed a pattern that became harder to dismiss with every page. Ethan took a slow breath before speaking. "People think they stayed quiet because they were afraid," he said. "That is only part of it. Some believed speaking would never matter because nobody above Mercer wanted to hear bad news." Maya carefully returned every document to the envelope before handing it back. "Keep the originals," she replied softly. "When the time comes, they will matter more if they never leave your possession." Ethan looked surprised by her answer. Most investigators would have collected everything immediately. Maya did not. She understood that protecting evidence also meant protecting the people connected to it. As the sun settled behind the courthouse, Maya returned to the department carrying nothing except her notebook. Mercer noticed the absence of folders, photographs, or interview recordings and quietly smiled to himself. He interpreted her empty hands as proof that she had found nothing useful. Standing near the evidence room, he watched her walk past without realizing that the most valuable evidence she had gathered could not be seen inside a box or placed on a shelf. It existed inside carefully verified timelines, consistent witness accounts, overlooked digital records, and the growing confidence of people who had finally decided that telling the truth might be worth the risk. Across the hallway, Maya briefly adjusted the small metallic pin fastened near the collar of her blazer before continuing toward the exit. To everyone else, it appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary accessory. Mercer never gave it a second glance. Sometimes the smallest object in the room carries the greatest weight, especially when the wrong person never thinks to ask why it is there. By Thursday afternoon, the atmosphere inside Grayford Police Department had changed in ways that only careful observers could recognize. Conversations became shorter whenever Maya Brooks entered a room. Filing cabinets that normally remained unlocked were suddenly closed. Daniel Mercer smiled more often than ever, yet every smile felt measured, as though he had already begun rehearsing the ending to a story only he believed he understood. Maya noticed the change without reacting to it. She continued arriving on time, completing every assignment, and asking only the questions expected from an attentive trainee. She never hurried. She never argued. She allowed Mercer to believe that his confidence remained completely intact. Imagine watching two chess players who both believe they have discovered the other's strategy while neither realizes the final move has already been set in motion. That afternoon, Maya casually mentioned during an administrative discussion that federal supervisors would eventually review local evidence handling procedures as part of her training evaluation. She said it only once, in an ordinary tone, before returning to routine paperwork. She never mentioned dates. She never claimed an inspection had been scheduled. She simply allowed the possibility to exist. Mercer heard every word. Although his expression remained relaxed, something changed behind his eyes. For the first time since Maya had arrived, uncertainty replaced certainty. He spent the rest of the afternoon making several unexplained visits to the evidence room, reviewing inventory logs that no one else had requested. Officer Ethan Cole noticed the unusual activity but remained silent. Captain Harold Vance assumed Mercer was simply preparing records for future audits. Only Maya understood that a single carefully planted sentence had accomplished exactly what she expected. People who feared discovery often created their own deadlines. As evening settled across Grayford, Maya left the building carrying only her messenger bag and notebook. She drove toward her hotel at the posted speed limit, stopping once for coffee before returning to organize her notes. Every observation fit neatly into a growing timeline. Missing digital files, inconsistent evidence seals, witnesses with matching accounts. After reviewing everything, she quietly closed the notebook and adjusted the small metallic pin near the collar of her blazer. A tiny green light blinked once before disappearing again. She looked at the clock on the bedside table and calmly turned off the lamp. Across town, Mercer remained inside the department long after most officers had gone home. The parking lot emptied one vehicle at a time until only his patrol unit remained beneath the parking lot lights. He walked slowly through the evidence room, studying shelves that had not interested him for months. His eyes stopped on a sealed package connected to one of the older cases Maya had recently reviewed. He stood there for several long moments before carefully signing the access log and removing the package. No one questioned him. No alarm sounded. His years of unquestioned authority had taught everyone that Mercer always had a reason. The following morning arrived clear and bright. Maya returned to the department with the same composed expression she had worn all week. Mercer greeted her politely and even offered to accompany her during a routine vehicle inspection exercise scheduled for later that afternoon. His friendliness felt unusually generous. Maya thanked him without hesitation. She did not decline. She did not appear suspicious. She simply accepted the invitation with the quiet confidence that had unsettled him from the beginning. As Mercer walked away, convinced that events were finally moving according to his plan, Maya glanced briefly toward the parking lot outside. Sometimes the most revealing decision is the one your opponent believes was entirely his own. By the time the afternoon arrived, both of them believed they were about to expose the other. Only one of them was correct. The afternoon sun hung low above Grayford as long shadows stretched across the department parking lot, making every patrol vehicle appear larger than it really was. Officer Daniel Mercer stood beside Maya Brooks with the relaxed confidence of someone who believed he controlled every detail unfolding around him. Several officers lingered nearby, finishing paperwork, talking quietly, or preparing for the evening shift. Nothing about the scene appeared unusual. That was exactly how Mercer wanted it. He suggested conducting one final routine inspection before Maya completed her assignment with the department. His voice sounded friendly, almost encouraging, earning approving nods from those within earshot. Maya accepted without hesitation. She handed him the vehicle keys with the same calm expression she had worn since arriving in Grayford 3 days earlier. Imagine watching someone smile because they believe they already know how the story ends. Confidence can become the easiest disguise to recognize when it appears too perfect. Mercer slowly walked around the vehicle, commenting on procedure for the benefit of younger officers standing nearby. He explained the importance of careful documentation, maintaining chain of custody, and protecting public trust. His words sounded polished enough for a training manual. Then he opened the rear compartment and paused. A few seconds later he straightened, holding a sealed evidence package high enough for everyone to see. Quiet conversations immediately stopped. Every eye turned toward the package in his hand. Mercer looked toward Captain Harold Vance, who had just stepped outside after hearing the sudden silence. "Captain," Mercer called, "I believe we have a serious problem." Within minutes, Maya found herself escorted into the conference room where department supervisors gathered around the large wooden table. The evidence package rested in the center beside printed reports that Mercer completed with remarkable speed. He spoke clearly, carefully describing how the item had supposedly been discovered during a lawful inspection. Every sentence sounded practiced. Every detail appeared organized. To anyone hearing the story for the first time, it seemed complete. Maya remained standing without interrupting. She did not challenge his account. She did not accuse anyone. She simply listened while Mercer continued building the version of events he expected everyone to accept. Captain Harold Vance finally turned toward her. "Miss Brooks," he said, choosing his words cautiously. "Do you wish to respond before we continue?" Maya looked at the evidence bag, then at Mercer, before quietly answering, "Is that everything you want included in the official report?" Mercer almost smiled. "Every important fact," he replied. Maya nodded once. "Good." The single word sounded almost ordinary, yet several officers exchanged uncertain glances. Something about her composure no longer matched the situation unfolding around her. Mercer stepped forward and extended his hand. "Your Federal Bureau of Investigation credentials," he said firmly. "Please surrender them." Maya slowly reached inside her blazer. Instead of immediately removing her identification, her fingers briefly touched the small metallic pin fastened near her collar, the same accessory Mercer had ignored all week. The motion lasted less than a second. No one in the room seemed to notice except Maya herself. She removed her credential wallet and held it in her hand without passing it across the table. Looking directly at Mercer, she spoke in the same calm voice that had unsettled him since the day they met. "Before I give you this," she said, "you should make certain everyone who needed to hear your report has already heard it." Mercer frowned, confused by the remark, but before he could answer, the quiet vibration of his department-issued phone echoed across the silent room. The screen illuminated. Every face instinctively turned toward the notification. Mercer looked down, and for the first time since this began, absolute confidence disappeared from his expression. The room remained perfectly still as Daniel Mercer stared at the glowing notification on his phone. The message contained only 4 words, yet they carried more weight than every report stacked on the conference table. "Federal evidence, upload complete." Mercer looked up, searching the faces around him as though expecting someone to explain what he had just seen. Nobody spoke. Maya Brooks calmly lowered her credential wallet onto the table without sliding it toward him. "You asked for my credentials," she said quietly. "You never asked what assignment they belonged to." Before Mercer could respond, the conference room door opened. A woman in a dark business suit entered with measured confidence, followed by several federal investigators carrying sealed document cases. The badge clipped to her jacket identified her as Special Agent Rebecca Sloan. She acknowledged Captain Harold Vance first before turning toward Maya with a brief nod that required no introduction. "Miss Brooks," she said, "thank you for completing the final stage of your assignment. Imagine believing you have just finished building the strongest case of your career, only to discover you have been standing inside someone else's investigation from the very beginning." Mercer finally found his voice. "What is this?" he demanded, trying to regain the certainty that had disappeared moments earlier. Rebecca Sloan placed a signed federal authorization on the conference table. "This is the execution of an ongoing public corruption investigation conducted in cooperation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," she answered evenly. "Officer Mercer, you have been the subject of that investigation for several weeks." Captain Harold Vance looked from the document to Mercer and back again, clearly struggling to understand how events had changed so quickly. Rebecca continued before anyone could interrupt. "Miss Brooks was assigned here under the administrative status of a trainee. That designation allowed her to observe departmental procedures while working under direct federal supervision." Mercer shook his head. "She has been watching me." Rebecca met his eyes without raising her voice. "She has been documenting facts." Maya remained silent. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply watched as the room slowly adjusted to a new reality. Rebecca opened one of the document cases and removed several organized folders. "During the past 3 days," she continued, "digital audit records confirmed unauthorized access to evidence files. Witness interviews established consistent patterns across multiple historical cases. Independent documentation verified discrepancies in evidence identification numbers. Most importantly, today's incident completed the evidentiary sequence required for this investigation." Mercer glanced toward the sealed evidence package still resting on the table. "That proves nothing," he replied quickly. Rebecca gently turned the package until the identification label faced everyone in the room. "Actually, it proves quite a bit," she said. "This package carries an internal tracking identifier unique to the evidence vault. It was removed after normal access hours using your authorization credentials. Another investigator placed printed access logs beside the package. Each page matched the electronic records Maya had quietly documented days earlier. Rebecca then looked toward Maya. "Please confirm." Maya adjusted the small metallic pin near her collar one final time. The recording system remained active throughout every official interaction, she answered calmly. The complete chain of documentation has already been preserved through secure federal storage. Silence settled over the conference room once again, but this time it felt completely different. No one looked at Maya with doubt anymore. Instead, every uncertain glance slowly turned toward the man who had spent years believing his version of events would always be accepted first. The story he thought he controlled had become the evidence that now stood waiting for him. The morning after the federal team completed its work, Grayford felt quieter than Maya Brooks remembered. The familiar sounds of patrol cars leaving the station and radios calling out routine assignments were still there, yet something invisible had changed. For the first time in years, conversations that had always ended with lowered voices continued without hesitation. Office doors remained open. People looked one another in the eye. Trust, once damaged, could not be restored overnight, but honesty had finally been given room to breathe. Imagine how different a building feels when fear is no longer the first person to arrive every morning. Inside the department, Special Agent Rebecca Sloan met with Captain Harold Vance to begin reviewing years of departmental records. No accusations were made without documentation. No conclusions were reached without verification. Every file connected to Daniel Mercer received a fresh examination supported by independent evidence, digital records, and witness statements. Officer Ethan Cole stepped forward voluntarily, providing the handwritten notes he had protected for years. Other officers followed. One by one, people who had remained silent finally discovered that truth becomes easier to speak once someone else has spoken first. Across town, Marcus Reed received news that his case would be formally reviewed. Lorraine Watkins learned that her son's record would also receive a new examination under the reopened investigation. Neither family celebrated immediately. They understood that justice is rarely a single moment. It is a process built one careful decision at a time. Maya spent little time discussing herself. While reporters gathered outside the courthouse hoping for dramatic statements, she quietly declined every interview request. She believed the investigation had never been about becoming recognized. It had always been about allowing overlooked facts to receive the attention they deserved. Late that afternoon, Rebecca found Maya standing outside the department, watching the American flag move gently in the summer breeze. She handed Maya a small folder containing her completed evaluation. "Your field assignment is officially finished," Rebecca said. "The Bureau is prepared to recommend your appointment as a special agent after final administrative review." Maya accepted the folder but did not open it immediately. Instead, she looked toward the entrance where citizens continued walking inside, expecting fairness from the people serving behind those doors. "There is still work to do," she answered quietly. Rebecca smiled. "There always is." As the sun settled behind the courthouse, maintenance workers removed an old departmental bulletin board filled with outdated notices and replaced it with a new one listing updated evidence procedures, accountability policies, and reporting resources. It seemed like a small change, almost unremarkable, yet every lasting improvement begins with something simple that people choose not to ignore. Maya walked toward her car carrying the same messenger bag she had brought to Grayford only days earlier. The notebook inside remained filled with careful observations, quiet conversations, and moments that reminded her why patience often accomplished what anger never could. Before driving away, she looked once more at the station growing smaller in her rearview mirror. She did not see a place defined by one person's mistakes. She saw a community receiving another chance to choose integrity over convenience. Some people believe a badge creates the truth. They forget that truth exists long before any badge is pinned on a uniform. And when truth is given the opportunity to speak, it does not need to shout. It simply waits, records, remembers, and eventually stands where no lie can stand beside it. In the end, Daniel Mercer believed he controlled the evidence because he believed he controlled the story. What he never understood was that the story had been documenting him all along, proving that real justice does not arrive through the loudest voice in the room. but through the quiet facts that refuse to disappear.